Time to go ahead and work on my tie rod clamp that I have on my Fusion tie rod. So I got the 1 3/4 clamp when I bought my Fusion setup so I can put my hydro on. And the clamps come with a 1/2 inch bolt and I believe it's a 5/8. So there's a difference in one's for a steering stabilizer, one's for your actual hydro, obviously the larger being for the hydro. Well, when I was down in Sand Hollow on Sand Mountain, I was doing faulty towers and I had a failure. I had the bolt actually get tore out of the threads. The clamp's an aluminum clamp. Now I'd like to blame the Fusion clamp, or TMR, who probably gets it from the same place where they make it. But I can't 100% say that because in looking at it, I realized that I had a metric bolt in a standard thread. Super close, so I couldn't tell the difference. I'm not sure where I got that bolt from, to be honest with you, but it ended up in there and it tore out. There was also a problem because of how I had it set up, and I'll go ahead and show you. This is my hydro setup. I have it disconnected. Here is the Fusion / TMR clamp. It does a good job because it's got 3 digging screws in here, but it still slides. So as you can see, I've had it positioned somewhere else, but it's eaten through because it got pushed and slid down. So my plan is I'm going to be replacing this. This is my spare. My original one that broke was right here. This hole is wallowed out, and then it has this steering clamp one, so I ran a 1/2 inch there. It's nice to have a spare. I just wish they would just drill this for the same size here, so you have a spare hole to use. It's actually for something you'd be using with this size of steering components. Who puts a steering stabilizer on a 2.5 ton tie rod? The problem is when you have this, you have to angle this. If you have it straight up and down, this gets too close to this tie rod. So depending upon whether you're going passenger that way or driver that way, this is going to get closer and farther away. So I had it angled, right? And then if you don't have enough space under here and you just have it flat, that's still too tight. And so what happens is when you turn, this pushes out against it. As you can see, it's been rubbed. This tie rod pushes out against that, which forces out on that bolt. And those aluminum threads just flat out can't take it. So this time around on the spare, I put a ton of washers in there and got a longer bolt to go and throw that in. So this is coming out now, and I'm going to replace it with this. A double shear. There's no threads in this to get ripped out. And I had this on order before I ever left. This is an RPM steering one. There's other brands that do something similar to this. Preferably, I would love it if it wasn't this kind of pinch with a single biter, but I'm going to put that up in there. And then I'm going to order a secondary clamp to also clamp on here. So it'll have this and a second clamp to try to help it from getting pushed around. I just put this back in loosely so that way I can show kind of the difference. So with this in, obviously this would be really tight. This one, I can get my pointer finger up to about the knuckle. You know, it touches as I'm going through there a little bit. So I'm interested to see when I switch over to the RPM steering if I get a little bit more space here or not. I'd love to have a little bit more space without coming in contact with that cover. As you can see, I've been scraping the cover with this bolt head when it's all the way in. Not bad enough that I'm worried about it by any means, but it's not something that I want to have happen. I'm going to go ahead and get this out. I'll probably drill and tap it for this size, and this will be my poor soul spare that I can part with on the trail for somebody else if they end up breaking one of these. Well, I have the new one with the bolt threaded through. I have the bolt head on the back side and the nut on this side, just because the nut's going to stick out further. And I don't have it as far at angle, but I'm telling you right now, I'm already getting more space easily. And I could angle it more that way and get even more space. Now I'm going to go ahead and do what you should be doing on these, which is red Loctiting so they don't back out on you, because this is the worst thing to back out. And this so happens to be steel instead of aluminum, so hopefully it holds up a bit better. And then that way I can tighten that down very tight and make sure that's not coming out. And then just so you can see, this is what a good working shape one is. So this steering stabilizer bolt, which if you have one of these, carry that bolt because you might end up needing it, to be honest with you. I would carry that bolt. I was able to run the rest of Faulty Towers with this one. And if you look in there, there's barely threads left. But it held just enough, and like every little bit I go out there and I tighten it back down. And then I ran, so I wanted to see, I had that one in my Jeep for the spare, but I wanted to see if this 1/2-inch bolt, how well it'll hold up. I ran all of the Maze on this. And a Maze is an 8 rated trail down in Sand Mountain, and no issues. I went on Double Sammy, which is a 7. I was on a bigger obstacle and snapped this thing clean off. So it's not one that's a permanent one, but carry that bolt. That might get you off the trail for sure. We have it nice and torqued to guten tight. So I didn't get any torque specs with this when I got it, but I just go by hand on those with some red Loctite. Now I should have done this before. You can barely see how thick those bolts are, but they are much thicker than the ones that come with these other ones. So still 6 bolts. These other ones are way thinner. It's like a 1/4 inch versus like the next step up, right? And then the nice benefit too is your actual hole to go ahead and put your bit in is much bigger here. So we're talking of the difference of a 3/16 between a 1/4, right? Which is only a 1/16, but that's a lot more, so you can have a lot more confidence when tightening it down. Now, I will say, positives steel, positives double shear, positives the bolt itself, because they make this in a double shear, but I don't personally feel good about it, because all they've done is they put another thing over top, and then it slides in here, and then the bolt goes through. So this has to shear, the outside has to shear, but you can still rip the threads out of this thing, right? Like, now it can't pull away per se if it's nice and tight in there, so that's a benefit, but I don't want anything threaded into here that has to do with my Ram. So no disrespect, but, and then these are a lot bulkier too. Now I do like the length, so the benefit there is you're looking at an extra inch or so, and that puts a lot more pressure across here, less likelihood of it pushing along, I would say, but it still slid. It still slid. As well as the biters, they're a different size than these bolts too, right? And so while you can get them in there, I mean, you can only go so tight. You're also in an aluminum piece here, digging into another piece of aluminum, and then you have to figure out what size it is when you have problems. So I did like that this is all the same size 1/4, even your set screw there. So that would be the benefit so far. Now, how does it run? I don't know. I'll have to find out. It might slide all over the place, and I might hate it later. But so far, I mean, TMR makes good stuff. They do. As far as this goes, I definitely give this a thumbs up. As far as how it is so far, much improved over this style. But I'll have that as my spare. Hopefully I'll be able to figure this one out and get it drilled out and tapped. So that way I have that to give away. But initial thoughts, impressed. Like the build, like the double shear, like the extra clearance away from here. We'll see if I have it angled right with that diff cover on there. But if I was doing this all over again, I would have never bought one of those. I would have gone with this 100%. Likelihood of you breaking this is a lot less, and you can easily weld it on the trail if you have yourself like a Bun Trail welder or a Premier Power welder on the trail.